Okay, here we go. Today is October 13, 2021. My name is Jerry Fielka. We're want to thanking Rob Grant for hosting us on his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. This is Interviews number 9. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Jerry Hamza. Jerry, where are you calling in from?
I live in Maine now. I live in a fly fishing mecca called Grand Lakes Dream. There's 100 people, so after living in LA for 35 years, you can imagine that's a transition. But we love it here. As a matter of fact, all the foliage is turned and it's just gorgeous.
That is great. And one thing I would suggest is lean in a little more and speak up because we can't hear you really clear.
All right. Okay.
That's
How's it?
good.
I'll lean in.
That's good. So, Jerry, we're going to ask you questions and you put them into the context you want. So
Okay.
the first question is, what's the best thing for a human being?
Peace. Peace, I think. Peace.
Peace, peace and quiet. I love that. What's your favorite form of information? How information comes into you?
Well, I get it a few different ways, but mostly I get it on computer, on the different, I love to scan, go all over the place and get different opinions, but I read a lot of, magazines and books. I'm a incessant book reader.
But did you grow up a book reader because your parents did it as an example on your own or some other way? How did you become a book reader?
Going to Jesuit schools. I
The
went to,
teachers,
yes, it wasn't, my father was very happy reading a Scrooge McDuck comic book and falling asleep. But when I started going to Jesuit schools, they had 3 hours of homework a night and they encouraged a lot of reading.
dude, you're getting this. We're going to get back to your upbringing. The next question is about information. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Oh, that's a good question, but I think it's got to do with safety. I think it's got to do with the idea of history repeats itself, and they want to know as much as they can about what has already happened and what could happen so that they're better prepared.
Dude, that was beautiful. And do you think this need to collect or gather information is more innate or more invented?
Hmm. Well, I never believed much about instinct. I read some articles years ago that said there were no instinct. That somewhere this was deep back farther in the memory. So I don't think it's innate. I think somebody started doing this at some point, and that's how I think it happened.
A good friend of mine thinks that too, Jerry. You have other people in that regard. Do thoughts create emotions?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you're laying, I don't know how it works with you, but I know how it works with me. If I'm laying in bed and I start thinking about times I got my ass kicked or something, I want to jump out of bed and go and shoot somebody. I haven't done it yet, but they certainly create emotion. Yeah,
Yeah.
and this could be in a million subjects. Relationships, so many things that memories trigger me, and I have a pretty visual mind, so it doesn't take much.
Well, you must have ESP too, because we're going to get into memory soon. But just staying on thinking for a second, I don't know what I think until I fill in the blank.
Hmm. I don't know what I think until I hear the whole proposition. Till I hear the question. I don't know.
That's
Till
good.
I understand the question.
No, and you put it in the hearing sense. McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. And Joan Didion said, I don't know what I think until I wrote it.
Oh,
So you put it in. I don't know what I think until I hear the whole proposition. That's the big picture. That's what we're after, like comprehensive awareness.
that's good because I think that's the right way. And I guess maybe there is no right way. I mean, you talk about Betty and fabulous writer, and it makes sense that she would work that way. I work differently. I wish
Yeah.
I had. I wish I had her talent and I could write like that, and then probably join forces with her.
Well, that's beautiful. And so, can humans think without language?
I think so. I think so. I think animals do. I mean, I know that I saw a picture of one place in Africa where they housed silverback gorillas. And one day, uh, one of them died. They'd been around for a while. So they had a vehicle uh, pick the dead animal up and drive it out. And all the live gorillas went up to the fence and didn't say a word and just stood there until the truck was gone. So I'm figuring they knew what was going on. And I'm figuring if they could know what was going on, we could find out a way to know what was going on without speaking.
Very good. Chomsky says that language is not just words, it's culture, it's tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what community is. Jerry, what do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
Are you talking like in terms of like an argument or something, or
In again, you put them into the context you want. Like if you're arguing with someone or you're just communicating with your partner or someone on the street and language doesn't work, what do you do? Which
I always try to reason. That's my first resort is to go in my brain and figure out, how to draw a person in to see my side of it. The country today is so divisive that I don't think we'll ever have a great country again unless they do away with that divisiveness. And the only way to do that is to communicate and, come in. So that's what I would try to do.
really well put. Jerry, your observations of humans, are they more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
Hmm. I think they're more thinking beings.
Yeah.
I think they would like to think that they felt all of what they feel, but I find that in my life, people, so many, I mean, they're good people, but there's also so many people that are just in it for themselves and looking for an edge and looking to shoot angles. I think they're thinking all the time.
Yeah. You know, my favorite is Bridget Bardot says, "When I make love, I don't think." I'm like, I
Very.
always go, that's good luck. So, Alan Turing asked these two questions in 1950. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Well, you'd have to prove the existence of a soul before you could make a connection like that. I mean, it's nice. It's nice to think about it, but we're not intelligent enough as a people to understand what the hell's going on. They just found, universes falling into other universes, and it's 2021. We don't know anything. We still don't know where we came from, where we're going. We're swinging around this mud ball. We have no goddamn idea. I read something last week which sort of stunned me. About a month ago, I was reading an article that said now what they call people and what we call people are two different things, but it says that 66 billion people have died on this planet. And then I'm reading yesterday, and it says this guy went to join the vast majority. So I mean, we don't know what happens to anybody. It's a nice thought.
Yeah. But it seems as though you are more an optimist than a pessimist overall. Would you say there?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think I could be a pessimistic person. I would have failed in my life. One of the things that really kept me going is, for some reason, I was always optimistic. I experienced 4 cancers in 3 years, and I'm talking to you tonight, Jerry. So I mean, you have to have a certain optimism, and you have to, you have to be able to detach, and say everything's going to be okay. I mean, that was my feeling during a really tough experience. So I'm definitely an optimist.
Beautiful. We're going to get back to that. But the other Turing question is, can machines think?
Mm. They will be able to. I think they'll be able to. I
Yeah.
don't know. I obviously don't know the process, but yeah, I think so. I think that's on its way.
Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Happiness. Happiness, because if I can read a book, if my businesses are going good, I have 2 sons that run those, and I can enjoy my life. To me, that's happiness, and that's what I want. If I wanted to go around looking for meaning, I would have become a rabbi or a priest or somebody different than what I did.
Jerry, thanks for you really get what we're all about here. The next question is, does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
No, I think all that stuff is in the synapses, and somehow we trigger it. I think we trigger it. I don't know how we trigger it, but I believe we do trigger it.
Yeah. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Mm. Mm. Wow. I'm gambling here. I'll go with light.
I like your gambling clause. So, a great poet, Audre Lorde, said, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Yvonne Rainer, another poet, responded to her saying, "You can if you expose the tools." What new tools do you suggest?
To to
Well,
do.
you can put it I often open my questions with cute quotes. You can apply them if you want. So you could say, "What new tool do you suggest to dismantle the master's house?" Or just in general for humans, "What new tool do you suggest?"
Oh boy, I would sure like to be able to read minds. If they could come
That
up with
is a
something where I could look into somebody, because somebody's going to be fucking around with you. They do that all day long. But if you could look into somebody's minds and see really what they're thinking, and look into their hearts and see what they're thinking, you'd have a better chance of surviving this planet, in a happy fashion. So that's where I would go. I would go. To me, everything starts with the brain and ends with the heart, and that's about the way I would. That's what I would want for a tool. If I could do that, to realize how many people would be in trouble if you could walk out and know what they were thinking. Holy Christ!
Now that is a great answer, Jerry. I don't think I've had that answer ever, and I love it because what's the that I just have to follow it up. What's the difference between reading minds and intuition?
Oh boy. We're talking about, when you talk about feeling with intuition, you're talking to me about feelings. And sometimes, and I don't know how it works, but sometimes you get close to a person and you can feel something and you don't know where it came from. And that's sort of my idea of intuition. So I guess I'd go with intuition.
Yeah. Jerry, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Waking up in the morning. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding about that. Uh no, no, my only worry when I go to bed at night is am I going to sleep all the way through? I hate getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and then going back to sleep. Outside of that, my I've had rheumatoid arthritis for 30 years. I'm asymptomatic with a heavy sed rate. I've gone through these four cancers, and once you get to that point, you don't go to bed worrying about a hell of a lot as long as you know that you have your will and your kids, your wife taken care of. What are you going to worry about? Did I catch enough fish today? Did I eat enough? At some point, the Bible even says, the Lord will provide. Now, whether you believe in the Lord or not, somebody's providing, especially in this country.
Beautiful, Jerry. Your longevity, do you explain it more on, I know it's both, more on lifestyle choice or DNA?
DNA.
Yeah.
DNA.
Yeah. Are
I,
you
I had
more
I had a
Go ahead.
great grandmother that lived to be 113, was 6 foot
Wow.
tall, and she was a midwife, and they would never let her do anything, but they would pick her up at midnight and take her to a birth. So I got to go. I got to go with that. Now, smoking your ass off or drinking yourself into oblivion, that doesn't help. But I'll still go with the basic genetics. And those
Yeah.
genetics can also cause you to do drugs, to smoke. That stuff can happen too if you have an addictive personality or whatever you have. So it's a more complex question than it sounds like.
It is really good. You know what we're talking about, the deeper level. It's just
Right.
not the surface. And it's funny because when you called me up at Frank Zappa's office and we first talked years ago, um, I was always inspired by a Zappa line. He said an anti-drug commercial on the radio in the 60s. He said, "Don't do speed. It will turn you into your parents." Now, you're already destined to be your parent no matter what you do. So if your parent's an alcoholic, you might grow up and not be an alcoholic because they were, or you might become an alcoholic because it's in your DNA. We're not sure, you know.
Right, right. And it's another thing is if you've had an abusive childhood, uh, and you have siblings, you notice that you and those siblings are very, I mean, in my case anyway, very caring of their children and try to go out of their way to do for them so that they don't experience the same hurt that you did when you were a child. Now, does everybody do that? No, but in my family, yes.
Beautiful. Can you conjure up your earliest memory or one of them?
Yeah, I my earliest memory was going to a funeral. Not a funeral, a wake. There was a funeral home in Rochester, New York, that was across from the post office. And on the way in, they had like a granite, uh, staircase with glass pieces in it. This old fashioned thing, I guess they used to do. And I can remember walking up and seeing them and going into the funeral home. What do I know? I'm 3 years old. And my godmother, whose husband died, picked me up and said, "See, Jerry, no more Walt." And she was quite hysterical because she lived next to me and we were very close. And my grandfather, thank God, took me and says, "This is her," which in Arabic is shit. And he says, "Let's go." We walked up the street hand in hand and got a hot dog, everything but relish.
Make me one with everything.
Yeah.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
More a blessing.
Yeah.
More a blessing because if you're curious and you want to learn, sure, bad memories can jar you, but there's nothing nicer than reading an exciting book or an interesting book, philosophical book, and being able to keep it, to hold it, to remember it. Sometimes it's like a language. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. And it's the same thing with reading and memory. And I think you got to use it to keep it. And that's my feelings on it, I guess.
Jerry, tell me, within your immediate family and then outside your immediate family, someone who is a role model, someone who had an impact on you, just briefly and specifically, what was that impact?
Huh. Doesn't necessarily have to be a positive one, does it?
Nope, it's just well, here's the thing. That's funny you asked that because when I say role model, that could imply positive. But when I say impact, that could imply a negative. And I'll give you the example. This important filmmaker, uh, she said for outside her immediate family, she said Hitler. Now she wasn't anti. She was saying as a kid he had an impact on her, but she heard more the word impact than role model. So role model does imply, positive, but
Yeah.
no, it's again, you put it into the context you want.
Well, I would probably pick my father, who, as I've gotten older, I figured out was very brilliant and completely fucked up. Uh, he he taught me. He really believed in hard work. As a matter of fact, he got me my first job when I was 5 years old at Lou's Poultry Shop. My job was to work for a nickel a day, which a day to me was probably half an hour, picking up feathers off the floor and putting them in. So he instilled a work ethic in me. They asked Picasso, who had every other woman on the planet, he had money coming out of his ears by the time he died, and they asked him what was the most important thing in his life, and he said it was his work. And my father instilled a major, probably neurotic work habit in me. And I'm glad he did. I'm
Yeah.
glad he did.
No, that was well put. Now, outside your immediate family, someone who made an impact on you, a role model, and what was the impact?
Uh, I had the woman, I told you about the wake, and the woman's name was Viola Ryan. You don't run into too many Violas anymore. And she had lost her husband. I was a baby, really, 3 years old, and she was so wonderful to me. I mean, she was like a mother to me. If I didn't have her, I wouldn't have made it. My mother, uh, for her own reasons that I don't particularly want to mention, but she was really capable of taking 3 kids that were born, and Vi took care of it, especially me, and she was wonderful, and that was right down the line. If it was your first bicycle, I got it from Vi. If it was you got C's Candy in California, you got Fanny Farmer over here. Easter came, Valentine's Day, you knew you were going to get a basket with red cellophane and dots on it and hearts. And that stuff made me feel loved. And if I didn't have her, I don't know where I had a psychiatrist tell me if I didn't have Vi and my grandfather, I'd be in jail or dead. Take your pick.
Well, I'm glad you're not. You're a fine young man there, Jerry. And I want to ask you the next question is, did your parents raise you a particular religion? I know they sent you to a Jesuit school, but did they make you practice religion and did you ever check out?
No, they were hypocritical. Not my father. My father didn't practice any religion. I think his father, there was never a mosque in Rochester, but I think he was a very religious Muslim. My mother was a Sicilian, and so they're all Catholics. So if you're ever in the market for a car bomb, I might be able to help you out. I get in trouble now.
No, that was good.
But anyway, my mother was a phony. She was a hypocrite. If I skipped mass, she'd kill me. She used to chase me with a broom handle under the bed, and I weighed about 8 pounds, and I'd go from one end to the other end, till she called my father, and I'd get killed. But she made me go to church, and I said to her, "Hey, Ma, how come I got to go to church and you never ever go to church?" And she would say, "God knows I'm sick. Ma, you're the only person in the world with a migraine headache that lasted 50 years, you know?" And yeah, so in other words, do as I say, not as I do.
Jerry, do you pray?
No. I think, if you want to call that, I try to think and communicate.
Right.
Something I don't know is there, but they can put you in lockdown if you do too much of that.
If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I was just testing you. That's why I put you through everything I did.
You're smart, man. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
No, I think evil people exist. I think there are people that are born evil. I don't know how the genetics get mixed up, who they're from. I've always had the picture in my mind. You mentioned Hitler before, and when I was a younger person, I used to love to go to the third floors where they would have the little babies in those little baskets. It had maybe 20 of them. I thought they were so cute, and I would look at them. And then I thought to myself, Hitler at one point was one of those cute looking, sweet, innocent babies. Now, what happened? What happened to the son of a bitch? What happened? Yeah, he's a lunatic, but he wasn't a complete lunatic. Hitler's fascinating to me because I've listened to a few of his speeches, and he was a good talker, actually. And he tried to paint. He wasn't a painter. He wasn't a house. He was a house painter, but he could paint. I mean, in other words, he wasn't completely empty, and he turned to goes from being a innocent little newborn to the monstrosity. How does that happen? I figure it's got to come from within the day he's born. The Catholics talk about, and I guess the Protestants too, I don't know what religion is about, original sin, and they baptize you to get rid of it. Well, to me, that's another way of saying that you're born with evil in you. Some of you. I don't believe we're all born with evil, but some of us are.
Yeah, I'm going to set up this next question with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. The question is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of quotes and thoughts, but the question is how do you, Jerry, advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to the Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. By the way, you mentioned Kennedy. I was reading something about Kennedy where he said if he didn't get laid every 2 or 3 days, he got a migraine headache. Just on a human level. Uh, so anyway, we get his question out of the way. I believe that the only look there's two ways to end an argument. One is to you know, destroy your opponent or get destroyed, and the other way is to reason. And I choose reasoning. And I don't think people's wants are that different. I think if you search a person and you can get him to talk to you, he'll give you some things that he cares about. And if you can facilitate that and make a deal, so to speak, I think things can work out.
Jerry, where'd you get that? On your own or how your parents raised you or somewhere else? Where do you think you got that reasoning over destroying?
Well, teachers. I had some great nuns, you know, and everybody makes fun of nuns and this and that, but I had some that were really wonderful, and I was taught never to touch anybody. Don't put your hands on anybody. My father, his family, they were violent. I mean, they were fighting with themselves in the kitchen. You know, I mean, it was crazy. And I was taught the opposite. And I also shied away from both those families split in the end over a will. A lot of families split up over a will. And they hated each other and they were full of anger. And I saw all of that. And I'm on board for kindness. I think there's a lot of stuff that we can do to help people, and I just think it's out there. I think the hardest part is finding out who to help and why you want to help them.
That is beautiful. Really touched me deep in my heart, Jerry. I'm for kindness too, and I am a nun freak. I love nuns. They raised me, and if you haven't seen this movie called Inquiring Nuns, look it up. It's an amazing film. It's beautiful. It's nuns asking people questions on the street in Chicago. And so James Joyce, who we have a commonality and we both like the book Finnegan's Wake and Ulysses, he was the first projectionist in Dublin over 100 years ago. He had a cinema called Volta Cinema. And he basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" And years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism." Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Enjoyment, enjoyment. You like it. You know,
Yeah.
Faulkner used to sit down with Tennessee Williams in New Orleans and get drunk every Wednesday. I know exactly where he went because these were two of my heroes. And he can talk about seeing stuff, about writing stuff, seeing stuff. He wrote a piece in the book called Spotted Horses. It was, I don't know, maybe 20 pieces out of a book. And it was as good an American writing as I've ever seen in my life. So if he didn't sit down at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, whenever he got up, first observe what was going on and then write it down, we wouldn't have it. Millions of people wouldn't have it. So, I think you need both. I don't think you just go out and see something and just say, okay, I saw it. I'll see you later. It's very selfish, for one thing. If you're a very observant person and you can see things. I worked with George Carlin for years, you know that, and he had a very interesting filter, and he would look at things and see them differently than anybody. He just had that filter. And the funny thing about him, one of the things that made him so popular was people would say to themselves, because they would share this with me and say, he thinks the same way I do, and I'd almost laugh in their face, but I think it's good to share stuff. I think it's good to share what you see, what you can do, what you can write. It's great. It's great to experience it too. I've been all over the world. It's nice. You walk around, it's beautiful, and you learn a lot. But I like writing it down and making a movie, being entertained at the same time you learn. It's better than sitting in a classroom with a boring professor that sits in a spinning chair and kicks his feet around during his lecture. So that's my feeling.
No, that was really good. It goes along with McLuhan said, if you got entertainment and education, you learn more from what pleases you. So we're learning a lot more. I know so many people who learn so much from George Carlin and a lot less from education, but it's how you integrate the two. And that was I was curious, just walk us through your career. Did you did you tackle such readers as Faulkner and Joyce in high school or college? And did you go to college and pursue a career? And then
High,
what led you into being an entertainment manager like with George? So just sort of walk us through your career, how it happened.
high school, really. I saw a book. I saw a movie once, and the star of it wanted to be a writer, and he had a portable Steinbeck and a portable Faulkner in his suitcase. And I thought, huh, that must be pretty good books. That's what he's carrying around trying to be. But with me, with my background, my father was a promoter, a concert promoter. When he was 16 years old, I guess he was a junior in high school, and this was right at the bottom of the Depression. And they gave him $300 to be the head of the entertainment committee. He found some dumpy place, a bowling alley or something in Buffalo that had a big ballroom on the second floor. And well, wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. He did the date at the school, and the agent told him, if you can fill the Sunday, I'll give it you for half price. And that's when he found the ballroom. And he sold it out and made $1,600 when his father was working for $8 a week. So you'd think he would come home and be nice. Instead, I got pictures of him wearing a pink suit and driving. He blew all the money in a hurry, but he did learn how to promote. He learned a lot and he taught me a lot. I worked with him in 1965. Country music stations were starting to go full time. And his background was extensive in country music because of a guy named Hank Snow. Hank Snow was a Canadian legend who was managed by Colonel Tom Parker. Parker only managed Tim and Eddie Arnold and Presley. So my father was on the road. They didn't have any country music promoters up north. They were all down south. Somebody gave him my father's name. He's running around playing a show. Presley, you know how much Presley was making a night? $75. Great. So he got into country, and country was very up and down in our area because we just didn't get the radio play. You might get 3 hours on a Saturday someplace, but you weren't going to get much. In 65 came, it all turned around. You had 24-hour stations, full-time day stations playing nothing but country. And then we expanded. I was able to get a billboard, and the billboard was always say, WXNO in Dayton, Ohio is going to go country full time. So, and I get on the phone with the manager of the station and I make a deal because they wanted to be connected with the artist. And we said, okay, you can present the show. And they would pound the living hell out of the concerts. And that's how I got into promotion. Now, as far as George, I used to hate being on the road, and I did not like working for my father. My father was a guy that, if you had $8,000 and you put it on a big silver tray and you threw it at the ceiling, Jerry got what stayed up there. Okay. So I was not happy. And it was hard. I'd be driving through the winter because we had program books that we would sell, and I'd be driving on a Monday night, and I'd see these little houses with smoke coming out, and they were watching Gunsmoke, and I was jealous, and I hated it. And so finally, I quit my dad. he'd go to my mother, even though they were split up, talk to him. What's he want to be, a bum? And I would say, tell him I want to be a bum. So anyway, one time he goes to my mother says, tell Jerry I want to talk to him. So I go and see him. And he says, listen, he wasn't going to rest till he got me back in the goddamn business. He says, I got a partner in Toledo that played 2 dates on a comedian and sold out both dates. The guy was loaded and not showed up, and they had to replay the dates, but he sold the tickets. He says, I can get Syracuse and Rochester, and I lived in Rochester. Shit, the only driving you do is going to be 80 miles to Syracuse. You want to try it? So I tried it, and we sold out 4 shows in 2 days. George walks in. He did the dates. As a matter of fact, I remember the first thing he said to me, I told him the Syracuse Herald Journal would like to interview you. And he says, why? Is it my birthday? That was where he was coming from. So I walked away. Anyway, did the shows, and he liked the experience. And I got 5 more dates, then 20 dates. And after a while, I was just about his only promoter. And he had a very bad experience with a manager. He was trying to produce his own movie and lost like $3 million and never shot a footed film. So he asked me if I would help him out, and he knew I was a promoter. So I started working with him, and I had 2 Nashville acts that wanted me to go with them. I let them know I wanted to get the hell out of Rochester, and I figured, I'd rather go with George. You get on an airplane, it's one guy. It's better than getting on a bus with 20 people. And, the way they would work, you collect the money on a Sunday, they drive home all night. You got to go to the office by 12 noon and drop off the money on Monday and go back on Tuesday and go over all the figures. I said, fuck that. That's too hard for me. And that's how I got into it. And it evolved from there. It evolved out of George's need. George needed somebody to do a lot of stuff. And besides loaning him money, I did a lot of stuff for him making deals with banks, making deals with creditors, and giving them material too. The best way to come up with material with a comedian, I think, is the way George and I did it. He had most of the talent, so I'm not obscuring that. But we would drive after shows, and when it used to be 2, 3 in the morning, you start to float. Your mind loosens up. You don't care much. You're thinking about your bed, but you start to say things you wouldn't normally say during the day, and some of them can be funny. And George, very observant, very sharp, would pick up on them and write them down or put them on a recorder, and show up 2 weeks later with a 10-minute piece.
Wow, that was a really good capsule of that, Jerry. Thank you. So you did not go to college?
Yes, I did. I went to John. Yeah,
What did you study in college?
Philosophy and English. I never made a quarter with either one of them.
Well, no, that gives me a good background. So, who were your comedy heroes growing up? Who did you laugh at?
Well, it's funny. I was going to tell you this. I thought about this. I wound up in country music and comedy. And when I was a kid, my heroes were Roy Rogers. And in comedy, I loved Abbott and Costello. Abbott and Costello me Frankenstein, Abbott and Costello me this one and that one. George taught me I learned a lot from him. He taught me something about Abbott and Costello. He says, if you're playing an Abbott and Costello movie or you get a chance to see one, completely ignore Costello and keep your eyes on Abbott. And then you'll find out why that team was so funny. And that still holds. So most people would think that it was Costello that fueled the deal, but it was actually Abbott. They're both great.
Yeah, no, it's a great pair, and there's a lot of great early comedians. But George also said his hero was Danny Kaye. What do you think? What do you think George got from Danny Kaye?
Blown off. Uh, he loved Danny Kaye, and I can understand why he loved him. You know, if you saw those movies, Jerry, he was fabulous. You know,
Yeah.
his movie life was terrific, and I guess he lived with his wife, who they split up and shared a house. That's funny, but like Jackie Gleason did. But he had the material, and he could execute. He could dance. He could laugh. He could play character. Fabulous artist. George adored him and went to try to get stood outside the stage door and with a tablet and a pen to get his autograph when he left, and he walked right by him.
Oh,
So so that changed his feelings in a way, but another way, he always respected him as a comedian. A lot of people thought he was a dick. Thought that he was. I mean, I knew a guy that worked for his television station in Cincinnati. He had a reputation. His reputation preceded him. Let's say that. But George adored what he could do, and I loved it too. But I liked I liked Frankenstein, Meets Abbott and Costello more. But that was me.
no, that is a classic film. If you study the history of comedy movies, it's rated as one of the top 10 easily.
Is it?
It's
That's great.
no,
That's
it
great.
is a great, really great film. Yeah. But, I'm sort of interested about what's the main thing you think you learned from George about life?
How not to live it. For one thing, I mean, George was a drug addict, a drunk, irritably depressed, uh, brilliant, observant, funny. Uh, but what I learned from him wasn't like how to live or anything like that. I learned specifics from him. Like he would say, this guy did that, this guy did that. He showed me how to prepare for a comedy set. And he had a way. We got into a rhythm. We did more shows for HBO than anybody else, and he had a set pattern where he would take the back of a small tablet, Jerry, and with a marker he'd put his 7, 8 routines, whatever he was going to do, and he did it over and over and over till he got it perfect. Till he got it perfect, and he started out his career with just funny stuff, fussy eater, you know, lightweight stuff. As he got older, and I think maybe I had something to do with this, he started getting into the philosophical end of life, and that's what I think really put him in orbit. I said to him once in the car, the people on the planet, I said, the planet is just fine. The people are fucked. Well, he turned that into a major, major piece. So he was smart, and then he'd come up with his own thing. He very often he did a piece. I don't know if you've ever heard it called Modern Man.
Oh,
It,
yeah.
well, that was something he kept under wraps, and I didn't even know he was working on it. And I think it's really a brilliant piece. And it was towards the end of his life. And I don't think he was quite as sharp, but boy, whatever time he put into that, it paid off. All his sharpness, all his brilliance came out. And then I also learned all the gossip about who was tied onto whose bed. He knew all the stories, from being in the business. And I used to like, and it's funny too, George had a reputation for swearing because of the dirty words. He never swore. George never swore. If he was gonna, he never swore without a purpose. There'd have to be a reason. He had he had running conversations with Sapphire. Sapphire, who ran the word section for the New York Times or the Sunday Times. They'd get on the phone and talk to each other. So, I mean, George was at a pretty high level with that stuff. And he passed a lot of that on to me. He passed me a lot of emails. I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot. He walked me around New York and introduced me to the city. This is where Washington did this. This is where the stockbrokers did it. This is where this guy got killed. This is this. He taught me. That's actually, somebody asked me what I missed the most about George, and that was it. I lost my teacher.
Wow. That is beautiful. Jerry, thank you so much because I'm curious, if is this a fluke? You said the industry. I always said after working with you guys for that half a year, I was so privileged and honored to do that. Well, I thought you guys were a fluke of the industry. Basically, it was one act, no writers. George wrote everything. He really didn't hire writers.
No,
And
never.
and you were the manager. And so, I mean, how many times has this happened in the industry? How many years approximately did you work with them? What's the total amount about?
33.
33 years. That's my favorite number. Now, how many HBO shows?
That's when they killed 13. That's when they killed Christ, you know.
Ah,
33. So I don't know.
and
Uh,
how many HBO shows?
I think 13.
13. Wow. But
And we own them all. We wound up.
yeah,
I was able to negotiate all the ancillary rights on all the shows. And believe it or not, but I mean, the man's been dead since 2008, and our business and our numbers are going up, not down, which is really freaky. You know,
yeah.
he's got some philosophical sayings, and people remember them, and they play the shit out of them on YouTube or wherever, and it helps us.
Yeah. But discuss that as a business person. You know, your philosophy, your English, your Jesuit background, your literature background, and then you end up being like this major comedian philosopher's main bud for 33 years, partner. You know, he used to say, I remember, he goes, I'm funny, he's money.
Yeah, he would say something like
And but explain that as a fluke of the industry. Is it a fluke in the industry? And how did you guys do it and not other people do it?
well, I grew up with my father, you know, taking me to theaters, and I never wanted to play arenas, and it hurt me at times with country more than anything else because you know I'd have to talk them into double shows because I felt that people, when they listened to an artist, wanted to hear and see, especially hear what they heard on the album or CD or whatever it was. And I really learned to love the soft seat, intimate setting. And I put George into those places. I never put him into, you know, a dump. And as the HBO, that's what really fueled everything. Uh, every 2 years, boom, we had 58.5 minutes. And at the end of 50, and at the end of the show, he would tell me the same thing, Jerry. He'd say, you know what? When we get done with this show, I don't want to do another one for 5 or 6 years. I just want to lay back and rest. And I learned after a while, just shut up and let him talk. 3 weeks later, he'd come back to me and he'd say, you know, I was adding them up, and we got 36 minutes out of 58 already. I could come up with 22 minutes, and we were off and running for the next show. And that would happen over and over and over.
That's good. So there's two questions about producing. So basically, you were the producer on 13 HBO shows.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty good. What a success, man. A screenwriting teacher told me a great film or a great comedy special, great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. great film or great comedy specials when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role did intention play in your creative process producing 13 award-winning HBO shows?
First of all, I think both those comments are true. They're great. Uh, for me, I wanted to keep George going because I wanted my idol, uh, in my mind, was Norman Granz. And Granz had Ella Fitzgerald for years and years and years. And, he had a store like me with only one customer. Well, he had Oscar Peterson too for a while. But I loved how he handled her. There was never anything, and wherever she would go, she'd sell out. And that's what I wanted from George. And I would watch what he did, and I'd go through her history and where she played and how she acted. And I mean, she had a fabulous voice. She was wonderful. And so was Granz. I never met Granz, but he doesn't know it, but it was my hero. And I wanted George to last. All these comedians that are dead, by the way, are forgotten, pretty well forgotten. Not all of them completely, but they're not remembered like George. Sirius XM did a survey with their listeners years ago to get the top 100 best comedians, and George came in number one. That's a guy who's been dead 5-6 years. I mean, they care about him because of his material, but also whenever he went into a town, he gave him a good show. And that's something Ella Fitzgerald always did. Give him a good show. My dad, by the way, played her when she was a 15-year-old kid.
Wow. Ella at 15.
At a dance. I'm trying to remember who the band was she was playing in front of. He said, Doris.
Sure, you really get my questions, and I appreciate it because the second question in your producing skills and is Marcel Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much did you and George think of your audience when you were making the HBO specials?
I thought a lot of them. George would go out on stage, and when George would say something, he was half kidding on the level. He would go out and he would say, "You're here for me, and I'm here for me. Who the hell is here for you?" It sounds like he's pulling a brick, but he wasn't. He meant it. He didn't care. He was out there to show off his material, and he loved HBO because of the viewership. It turned it into a high wire act for him, but it was all about him. It's all, he didn't want to go. I mean, we didn't have empty houses. We sold out everything, and he didn't have. If an audience wasn't respectful or if they didn't laugh, it didn't bother him one way or the other. He didn't give a fuck. Once he said something that was really quite horrifying suggestion of something to do. I won't mention what it was, but about 20 people in the audience got up and walked out. And I went backstage and I told George, "Hey, George, when you said this and that, about 20 people got up. And you know what he said? Isn't that great? Isn't that great?"
That's a sign of a true artist. But it's great. The partnership you had was beautiful because you made the observation and it was true. And I wanted to go into that because I was there in the audience when he said the line, these people who are anti-abortion, they're so ugly you wouldn't want to fuck them anyways.
His opening line for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And in that pattern that I mentioned previously, it got to where he would come out and hit him over the head with a line like that. Then he would go into some lighter stuff, and then, but with a theme, but light. Then he'd hit him over with some more one-liners. You show me a tropical fruit, and I'll show you a cocksucker from Guatemala. he, he would throw that in. He loved to throw that in. And then the philosophical thoughts that he believed in start coming out in 15, 10, 20-minute hunks. And those are the things that have turned him, not to be a jerk, but if he's not a legendary comedian, I don't know who the hell is.
No, dude, he's truly. I mean, what a life you've had being able to work with someone who crossed over. He's an amazing observer of life, a philosopher, and a pop, comedy icon. But
Right.
let's go into satire for a second because I don't like, there's some people who use this word attack, like, oh, he attacked the anti-abortionist. And basically I go, well, no, that's what satire is. He's not literally hating them or attacking them. And Jonathan Swift said he compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. What do you think the function of satire is? What is it? Why do humans pursue satire and how does it shape our behavior?
Well, I think they try to make fun of people and teach them at the same time. George showed a lot of anger on stage and in his TV shows, but it was all false anger. It wasn't real. It was never, very, very, very seldom did he show his ass that way. It was just trying to make a point. And isn't that what a satirical writer is really doing? He's trying to get their attention. Maybe they got to get halfway through the book before they say, oh, that's what he means. But I think George would do the same thing, a different way, a different way. I'm
Do
sure he
you,
did.
yeah. Do you think artists in general, whether they're film, painters, writers, do they have a moral obligation?
No,
Yeah.
not, not to the audience, maybe to themselves. No, I don't believe that. I think that you take a guy like Van Gogh. Come on, he's cutting off his earlobe. Who the fuck is he going to have a moral obligation to? You know, I mean, really. Uh, you know, and I think George, if he thought that he swayed somebody's thinking, even if it was in the wrong direction, he'd be proud of it. He would say, "Hey, that guy came in thinking this, and I turned around." George was basically a lefty. He was from, not a hard lefty, but he was basically a lefty. Grew up in Manhattan, and he had his opinions. We would have his opinion on abortion, all the liberal postures, most of them, except one, and that was the war in Iraq. And he and I got into it a few times. We never had debates. You couldn't even use the word wrong with George. You'd say, "Oh, I'll debate you on that." It didn't mean anything. You say it to George, he took it right the way the dictionary wrote it. But when the war in Iraq started, I told George that's going to turn into the biggest clusterfuck you ever saw in your life. And he says, "No, it isn't. We're going to kick the shit out of them." I says, "George, I'm half Lebanese. I know those motherfuckers, and they're tribal people. Their government, they're just stooges who they really listen to. They're the tribal people. And in the end, it's just going to be a mess." And that guy would go out and give the report every day, every day. And in the end, it did wind up a complete mess. As far as I'm concerned, anyway, the only war we should have been in, I just throw this in for free, is World War II. And since I was born in the middle of it. But Vietnam, I lost one of my very best friends is written up on that plaque down there. And, I don't understand the reasoning. I can't make you, they say, well, stop communism. if you believe something, and I put a gun to your head, I can make you say you don't believe in it, but it's not going to really change your beliefs. You just want to get away from the gun, but you're still going to keep your same beliefs. And I don't know, with the United States, it seems like so often we wind up on the side of the bad guy. We wound up with the Shah of Iran. I mean, I could go through 10 of them. You know who they are. The guy in Vietnam. I don't know. It's
Well, Jerry, how do you keep your government from going to war? How would you address that?
hmm, getting a little dry. Well, that's hard. That's really hard. The only way you could do it was with some, in my mind, is with some kind of a coalition. There are enough. There are enough countries that they thought the same way you did, were willing to throw their men, their soldiers, their blood and treasure into it if somebody stepped out of line. That would be good, but then they'd also have to have the carrot that if this country generally when a country winds up going to war, they're starving. Even Hitler in the Second World War, they say it took a wheelbarrow full of Deutsche-Marks to buy a loaf of bread. Vietnam, those people didn't have anything. So I think it's a two-handed deal. I think you make them know you blow their head off if they fuck with you, but on the other hand, you try to help them build an economy, and an economy that's dependent on cooperation from both sides.
Beautiful. Yeah, I like Dick Gregory said, "Why do we try to force democracy on other countries? It doesn't even work here."
No system works, does it, Jerry?
Yeah,
What system works?
you're
No
right.
system.
Yeah,
There's as long as to me, as long as there's a bottom level, people that are really hard up, the system doesn't work.
yeah.
And
Well,
and
yeah. Utah Phillips says anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Jerry, who should or who's entitled to make the rule?
oh boy. Well, I'm a anti-authority guy, so I don't like to build up anybody as making the rules. I think somehow it should be done where everybody has a little vote. I don't believe in powerful people because I think they're full of shit anyway. You take a guy like Nixon; he was walking around, like he was Moses for a while, and he went out like a fucking bum. So I don't know. Again, what you're really talking about is a system of government, and nobody's ever come up with a perfect one. I don't even know if anybody's ever come up with one you'd give a C plus to. It's sad. It's sad, and that's the way I really believe it is. I mean, there's a lot of people.
It's how we in the long run, it's how we cope with what we don't like about the systems or other people. But I'm curious, just in general, I know it's both and it depends. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
What was the first word?
Conviction or compromise?
Oh, I think compromise. I think
Dude,
I think you have to compromise because there's right now you have to compromise because everything's so divided. It's almost down the middle, and the only way you're ever going to get anybody to cooperate is to give up a lot of your own ideals. That's sad, but I mean, I think that's the only way, for practical reasons, it would work.
you've accomplished a lot in your life, Jerry. How do you rate these three elements? Skill, luck, and ambition. What played the biggest role second and third?
Skill was first. I learned I learned the concert business cold with my father. Uh, ambition, I don't know. I don't know that I was ever that intrigued by all the business. I saw a lot of dirty things done in the business. People that got stabbed in the back, people that got promised stuff, acts that you thought you had and, to promote. And all of a sudden we're gone. What was the other one besides?
Luck.
Well, let me tell you something. Maybe you've heard this. Napoleon had his number one general come to him, and he came to him with a recommendation. And he says, this guy is a strategic genius. He knows how to govern, he knows how to control large groups of soldiers. He's fabulous. And Napoleon said, but is he lucky? So luck is skating next to timing. And I would have to say that timing with George would have to come right after skill, because if he didn't fuck up his money, if he wasn't doing drugs, when I first started to work with George, he had a road manager that would put 5 lines of coke out on the dressing table. He'd come off the stage, he wouldn't say a thing, and that was it. He was really fucked up for a long time. So if he wasn't fucked up, and if he took care of business, and that, maybe it would have never happened. Who knows?
Now, fill in the blank. Anger can be a productive emotion when?
When you're getting a divorce, no. Anger can be a productive emotion if you find out that you've been cheated. If you discover that you've been robbed, cheated, dishonored, then I think you have to be angry and you have to show your teeth and you have to bring it to a head. Because if you just let it fester,
Very good. Is perception reality?
No. No.
Jerry, in your career, you've had a long career. Tell me one major element that stayed the same and one major element that's changed.
Well, I think, for one thing, that has changed, I think the technical quality has gotten fabulous today, especially in theaters, the lighting, the sound, all of that. A person can go there and be entertained and see a show. It's even true in movies. I mean, movies, they got so many great things now we didn't have, and they're wonderful. They don't give these people, I've had this discussion with people before where I tell them I think people in the entertainment business are flat out genius. I mean, the stuff that they do, holy Christ, you couldn't think of it in a million years, And so that's the stuff that's changed. The stuff that has stayed the same is a little tougher question, but because they still have headliners that draw, the prices aren't the same. I'm trying to think of what the hell is the same.
I mean, for you personally being in the business, what has stayed the same? What's kept you, in the business for so many years?
Oh, that's different. I'm sorry, I didn't take it the right way. I think actually the applause.
Yeah.
I think actually, if you put somebody out there, and I played a lot of acts besides George, and if you can get the people standing up and getting somebody out there 2-3 times for a bow or an encore, that's the payoff for me. I always believed that I could make a living in a lot of things, But the one that I enjoyed was getting that reaction from people. I had years ago, and I never did it before in my life. Uh, I had a date on hold at the Eastman Theater in Rochester, which is a high tone theater. And I got a call from the guy that ran the Russian ballet, the Moscow Ballet. And he had the number one ballerina in the world in his group. He says, "We're leaving Toronto and we're on our way to Washington for a 2-week run. Is there any chance we could slip into Rochester on the Monday on the way down there?" Well, I was nervous. I didn't know who this woman was. What do I know about ballet? I said, "All right, you give me something where I don't get murdered. I don't want to sell my house over this shit." Uh, so the guy gave me a date, and those tickets sold so fast, and those people were so appreciative. And I got calls. The sports editor wanted to talk to her about, her muscles and her training. The city editor, the political editor, everybody. That was a hoot. That was great.
Beautiful. I think everybody's walking around trying to be acknowledged in any form, any degree. So, Jerry Lewis Carroll said, "I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast." Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
No, no, I think there are many things that are not possible for us and are never going to be possible for us in the form we are, in this human form. But I think there are other forms to come. I think that we're going to learn a lot more. Uh, and then you'll be dead, I'll be dead, but there'll be possibilities. We'll understand it. We'll be able to see to the bottom of the barrel. Every once in a while they come up with a UFO sighting and everybody makes fun of it. Well, most everybody. But today, you think of how big these universes are and everything else, and the idea of thinking that we're alone out here is pretty egotistical. And also that we're smarter than they are. Why would we be smarter? They're probably smarter than we are. Who knows? But that's why I don't believe there are things that aren't possible. There are plenty of things that aren't possible for me,
Yeah.
but not for all time.
Beautiful. So, are you more afraid of old ideas or more afraid of new ideas?
I don't know. I either one. I weigh them up.
Yeah.
Depends on what the idea is.
Yeah. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're usually taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness that you've turned into a strength.
Well, I think that I used to be very insecure about picking out artists and producing shows for the road. We did a lot of package shows, and I would be really uh, nervous. Were we going to do business? How was I going to tell my father if it fell on his face? Because he could be a maniac and everything else. And then over time, I found out, hey, you're really good at this and you win almost all the time. So I got stronger from being really an emotional weakling one way. I became very strong, and that came from success.
Yeah. Well done. You really answered that question well. Thank you. What's the most significant difference between women and men, physical aside?
Oh boy, women are probably smarter. I remember when I was going to grammar school, and it seems like when they'd ask a question, all the girls would be jumping out of their seats. They had the answer, and the boys would be sitting there. And I know boys mature later and all that shit. But I I think that there's a lot of brain matter uh, that they get that we don't have, and because they're physically weaker and because they've been intimidated for so many years, they don't break out as fast as they could, but they're breaking out fast now. I heard they graduated more lawyers last year that were female than were males. So, that's all changing. But I basically think that their instincts are sort of better, and they always talk about intuition, and maybe it's a crap, but maybe there's something to it.
Why do you think women live longer than men?
Because they aggravate the shit out of the men. I don't know. Their bodies are lighter. Generally, maybe it's less physical stress on their
Yeah.
bodies. That's they die. But they do. What do they live like 8 years longer or something like that?
Yeah, they say it's basically 74 for the average American male and 84 for the average American female. So who knows?
Well, you just call her in the room when you're on your last breath and have the pistol under the pillow. Otherwise, it's never going to feel very fair. Uh, that's the only thing I can really think of is that they are lighter. The men, I think, generally have to go out and make a living and worry more about it. I don't know. Hmm.
That's good. So there's a saying that goes, "You create what you resist." Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into "You are what you hate." And James Joyce said it well. He says, "It's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve." And I
Yes.
always like Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, "Thank God I'm an atheist." So
Yeah, right.
how do you react? How do you react to this line? You create what you resist. One creates what one resists.
Hmm. Well, I'm glad you went off. By the way, Bob Goldthwait's from Syracuse, and
Is
so
he?
we were neighbors. Yeah, I liked him. Uh, I think it's a religious question. Way to me, it's a religious question. People, I've noticed among Jews that I do business with that are pretty sharp guys, agents, managers, directors, producers, different people. And if you talk to the man and you say, "Hey, Yom Kippur is coming up," oh, please don't talk about Yom Kippur. But when Yom Kippur comes up, they're in that temple, so they they're not. Women will say, "Yeah, I'm going," but the men are hypocritical. They show up. They show up all the time. Uh, if you try to be, people try it all the time. Don't they say I'm an agnostic? I don't know what to believe.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, they don't come up with concrete answers. That's a hard question to answer concretely.
Yeah. Well, there it's also even more to what you resist persists. So whatever you fight against, you empower it. But it varies. Jerry, we're coming to a close. We got about 7 more minutes. I want to thank you. This has been truly great, and you really get what we're after. How do you find peace of mind?
Hmm. Let's go to sleep. No, I read. I love to read. I love to learn. I'm a collector. I like to collect books and fly fishing equipment and stuff like that. And I love movies. My wife and I will sit in bed and watch some uh, movie if it's any good. There's so many channels now. There's so many choices. I even found last week, and you probably knew about this, but there's a channel. I think it's called Free Black and White. You
I
can
don't know about it. I'll check it out.
you can get every black and white movie. I mean, This is for a guy my age. This is tremendous, and that I relax. That I feel like, wow, it's worth getting old if I'm going to get a few of these.
Billy Wilder said a great one. He says, "A black and white is more true than color."
Hmm.
And it like resonates for people like us because we saw a lot of movies in black and white, and you know, um,
I
if you
love
were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
You're going to gain a lot, but you're going to lose a lot.
Good. On,
That's
on what on what occasion do you lie?
well, I'm usually not in the back of a police car, so that wouldn't be it. I try not to lie because I feel that lying shows fear. And fear is usually in lying. You lie because you're afraid of what the consequences of something are going to be. And if you haven't figured that game out by the time you're my age, you might as well throw in the towel. Now, people, if they're having affairs with somebody, they're going to lie. There's a lot of things. I don't do any of that stuff. First of all, I found out that I have friends of mine that had affairs on their wife. Every one of them got caught. Every one of them got tortured, divorced. Money, partnerships, people that embezzle stuff, they get caught. I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, really good. These are 5 Alan Watts questions, really short, just off the top of your head in a couple words. Who started it all?
Don't know.
Are we going to make it?
Maybe.
Where do we put it?
Under hope. And George had a saying, fuck hope. He was dying at the time, but that's what we have a t-shirt that says fuck hope, but that's the only thing I can think.
No, under hope is a great line. Good follow up, too. Who's cleaning it up?
Jeez. I don't see anybody cleaning it up. Not innocently, not with no ulterior motive. I mean, there's people that claim they are, but I don't think anybody's cleaning it up.
Really well put. Is it serious?
What's going on today? All this stuff? Absolutely. It's very, very serious. It's very serious. And I think there's a lot of stupid people in this world that have forgotten or never saw the films and what it looked like after Hiroshima. And that was just an egg bomb. That ought to look at or imagine what it could look like with the weapons that they have today. And who knows, man? Maybe that's the way we go out. I don't know. I don't know. I hope not. I hope not.
Yeah. Okay, Rob, you got a question or two to follow up here before I close out?
One, I promise.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oscar Wilde said, if you want to tell people the truth, make them laugh or they'll kill you. And I think George Carlin, he embodied that. What's the truth that people need to hear today?
Well, I think we're a corrupt society, financially, for one thing. People today, they can't even get them to take jobs because they're getting handouts from the government. You have, I knew a Mormon family that knew some fundamentalist Mormons, and they would say, have as many kids as you want, bleed the beast. The beast us. So I mean, it's a crooked setup. You got you got Maxine Waters makes 160 grand a year. She lives in a $5 million house. Now I wasn't the worst mathematics student in school, but I can figure out you're getting a lead somewhere.
Wow. All right, Rob, you got a follow up, or that's it? I got a couple more.
Yeah, my only follow up is so that the role of the comedian, say, as the soothsayer of society, is to expose this corruption in a way that people can laugh and think.
That's a question. If you're asking me, I think that, well, I know with George, he didn't want to ever be historical. He wanted to be hysterical. He didn't care what impact. People would talk like you're talking. When you got the audience, you should say this to him. You should say that to him. He didn't give a fuck. All he wanted to do was be on stage and get on that high wire and win. He's a completely self-obsessed person. The real good, I'll say this and I'll leave you guys alone. If you're ever going in the management business or whatever business, and you get a guy that comes in and he says, I got a family, I want to put my kids through school, I'd like to have a little house, throw him out of your office. But if you get a drunk that stumbles in and he's swearing, maybe he throws up on part of your furniture, but he makes you laugh with his first line, he could be the son of a bitch you can live with.
So there's hope for me.
There's hope. So let's close out, and really want to thank you a lot, Rob, for hosting us. And Jerry, this has been truly enlightening. The last question is, Jerry, what gives you the most optimism?
History, I guess.
Yeah.
History. I mean, we've come through so much horror, and we breed like rabbits. So even if there's only 4 or 5 of us left, we can start all over again. I would say history. We've overcome a lot of stuff, not just our country, a lot of countries.
Thank you so much, Jerry. It's been so much fun. Really great. You really got it.
You're very welcome, and thank you for having me.
That was hilarious. Thank you, Jerry.
Bye-bye.